Nasheed,
Yeah,
if you listen to some of his arguments, he does not deny the existence of the African connection. He's not saying there's a separate group of people
Tariq
that
Nasheed
have
the
no
fourth,
African
right?
connection. If you go back to his early statements, right? And when you began to look at and analyze this argument about the existence of this indigenous black group of people who are non-Amerindian, who are non-African, it does not, it takes a little piece of what Tariq Nasheed said. It takes a little bit of what the more science people said. It takes a little bit of a bunch of different black people and what they said, and then it distorts it and creates something else. And then it's pumped out there when in questions like, where are the ships? It's pumped out in questions that are designed to make you doubt or have contempt for being African.
So, Ozie, where are the
it's a way
ships?
to divide us. It's a methodology to divide us. This misinformation dividing us, because what it's doing is making us argue about our own identity. It's an attack on our identity. And that's the bottom line to it, right? So in terms of looking at it and trying to understand it and analyzing it, if we began to look at the facts and look at, okay, where is this group of black people that are non-Amerindian, that have no connection to Africa whatsoever, and what evidence is there to support their existence? When we actually start going through to look at actual evidence, we don't find any. What we find is people making arguments without a genuine, legitimate basis, or making arguments based upon misinformation that's been presented that's not valid. So in terms of looking at this thing, one of the reasons why, at least for me, it's important is because if you take a look at the progress that black people have made and where we are in history, based on where we were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and look at the progress that we've made. And now, once we get to a point where genuine unity can take place, genuine progress well beyond where we are today can take place, now we become under an attack. And now we're arguing with each other over stuff that does not make sense. And what they do is they go to the weakest of us and provide us misinformation. And we got people repeating the misinformation and making arguments. And then what they'll do is, instead of having an intelligent conversation, they'll try to overtalk you. They'll go into a shouting match. They become disrespectful and belligerent. They start calling names. And the reality of it is that it's not originating in our community.
Absolutely. And I appreciate coming onto your panels and definitely listening to your scholarship, Dr. Ozie. And just for some of the people in the room who do not know who this gentleman is, while he's speaking to our ancient history, he definitely is qualified in our contemporary genealogy. So he is someone who also frequents the records, and he knows that even up close, when y'all claim these different tribes, these different nations, we do not see it in your genealogy today. So that is another thing. So while y'all are arguing over the bones of Lucia, when we look at your family histories, we see that those stories of being Cherokee and Blackfoot and all those different things are exactly that, just stories.
And like sharing, like just showing a bunch of pictures on Google over and over and over again is not going to change that fact.
So, Ozie, where's the slave ships? If you believe there's slave ships, let's go to the slave ship theory. Let's go, because nobody can say nothing. No one cannot say nothing or disprove the slave ship theory.
Let her ask the question. Let her ask the question. Go ahead.
Thank you. So where's the slave ships? Where you believe the slave ships are, and since no one can disprove the slave ship theory, where you feel the slave ships are. There's none in the museum. There's none in the water. There's none. 4.1 million people cannot come in slave ships, even separate, without no food or water or no plan, when people were just trying to get exiled from Spain, so, just looking for gold in a new world. So where you feel the slave ships, what happened to the slave ships, and what happened during that time, when that sparked the Atlantic slave trade? What happened? Like, well, if Spain was running from exile, they were looking for gold in a new world, not for slaves. And you know how slave ships.
Let me respond to you. Okay, first of all, they weren't just coming to look for gold, because they came, they set up plantations, they were making other kinds of gold. So they were doing sugarcane, they were doing different types of products that they could mass produce, and they needed labor in order to do this. They were actually copying the model that had been used by Arabs against black people in Africa, because Arabs actually enslaved black people and exploited black people for almost 800 years before the Europeans did. But if we look at the slave ships, today there are about 2 military grade ships from that period of time that survived. They were maintained in a museum type quality setting, okay? If you look at wooden ships, because these were wooden ships, and if you look, if you go into my, it's one of my posts or whatever, I do a post and I talk about the slave shipyards where slave ships were built, and I talk about the, what is it called? The Tremetus. It's what's called a marine bivalve mollusk. And some people will call it a worm, but it's not a worm, it's a mollusk. And a school of these mollusks will eat a wooden ship within 3 to 5 years. Okay, they'll eat the whole ship. And then in addition to that, there are also other forms of bacteria that will even eat the metal, any metal fasteners and everything else. But there have been about 20 slave ships where there are artifacts that have been recovered from 20 slave ships. And in addition to that, there is robust records of the production of slave ships. There's court cases where there were slave ships where there were disputes over collecting the insurance because the ship sank. There are also other records like tax records. There are records regarding the from ports where slave ships, came and they delivered their cargo. They were taxed. There are records of that. There are records from the auctions that took place. There's actually so many different records that prove the existence of a transatlantic slave trade that it is really utterly ridiculous to say that it didn't occur, and to say that it didn't occur is like denying reality. I mean, so in terms of, if you look at the actual evidence and you go and like along the west coast of Africa, you can travel, there's like 79 slave ports. Number of them have been designated as national or World Heritage Sites, such as Goree Island, such as Elmina Castle, Badagry, and Bimbia. So, not only is there records and documentation on the African side, and documentation and records in Europe, and documentation and records in the Americas, Central, South America, the Caribbean, etc. It's just such an abundance of records. So when someone says, where are the ships? And we have ships that are made of wood that sunk, or even if they didn't sink, they don't exist because no ship exists from that period of time. So when you begin to look at it and you ask the question, what it does is like, wow, because if you actually just do a little investigation, you can find the answer pretty easily and determine that the ships are not there, that you're not finding a bunch of ships. Why? Because they don't exist anymore, because in terms of decay, in terms of the marine bivalve mollusk. And when you start really looking at the evidence for it, and you ask this question and look at the source that the question is coming from, it's actually somebody who's disingenuous asking the question. What they're doing is they're trying to get you to repeat a question and raise questions about something that in reality, it's like, it's something to sow seeds of doubt in you to make you believe, well, there was no slave ships. So they'll tell you, well, the Mississippi is the Nile. There is no Nile in Africa, that the Mississippi is the Nile. That Thebes is a city in America, not in Africa, not in the Nile Valley in Egypt. That none of that exists. So think of what they're saying to you, of what they think of you, to get you to repeat that kind of stuff. And you got people coming out repeating that, right? It's like, if you go to Egypt, you can go to Thebes, you can go to Cairo, you can go to Memphis on the Nile in ancient Egypt and see the ruins. It's so well documented. And then when you look at the Mississippi, Memphis was organized in 1820? Cairo, 1820s? Thebes, the 1820s? Because these were named that after the Egyptian cities by Europeans, and they're of modern existence. So what they're doing is you got people that are promoting these thoughts and ideals, because what they're doing is they are literally attacking your identity. They're making you doubt who you are, so that you'll say, oh, I'm not an African. So they got people saying, I'm not African. And so
what benefits
people that they say are black, because they can't deny you being black. So they say, okay, you're black, but you're not Amerindian. You're not Native. You're not an Amerindian, not a Native American, and you are not an African. You have no connection to Africa. So you got people saying, we just dropped out of the sky and we're here, but you can't explain how you got here. You have no evidence to support your existence here independently. It just really boils down to denying who you actually are.
But if we're denying what we are, why can't we? If our parents told us that we're from America, how are we gonna doubt from that? So they're lying about this, and there was no they're lying about us being an American. And I find that there's a Kemet ship that's wooden and in the museum, and it's billions, like millions of years old, and it's still in the museum, but there's still no slave ship. So I don't know about the whole wooden ship theory, but yeah, my parents always told me that I'm from America and they're from America and they never came from Africa. So what you feel about the misnomers about Black, African American, and Negro, which we can't find our identity with? What do you feel about that?
Let me respond to that. Let me respond to that. Okay, if you look at, for example, Dr. Henry Louis Gates has done a lot of work with helping people do their genetic research, not only doing their genealogy, but also doing their DNA and genetic, analysis. And what he finds is that you have quite a number of Black people who have been told, well, you're Native American, you're not African. We didn't come from Africa. We have no connection to Africa. And then when they do the study, they study the DNA, they do the genealogical tree, they find that they have no Native American connection. And one of the reasons is because if you go back and look at what it meant to be and identify as an African, Africans were depicted as savages running naked through the jungles with bones stuck to their nose. And they were defamed on such a scale that no one wanted to be. It was like a bad word to call you an African. you had just in the last 50 years, you had people that, young kids that if someone said, well, you're African, it's like, I ain't no African booty scratcher. It's like they depicted in the movies and all that kind of stuff because of the hatred that has been promoted against being an African. So people deny being an African so they could have 99% of their DNA shows that they come from Africa. And they'll take the 1% of their DNA that came from Europeans or from Native Americans or from Asians or from somebody else, and they'll claim their identity based on that 1%. Why? Because of self-hate. It's a form of self-hate. And the point is that once we really understand our history and recognize the achievements that Black African people made, we won't be ashamed of being African. We won't be ashamed of having African heritage. We've persevered. We've overcome so much. And so, why is it that we have parents? A lot of times, either the parent knew better and told you that, but a lot of times the parent didn't know themselves. In many cases, we're talking a multi-generational effect.
I don't know about that, but go on.
No. And also, we have people that have come up with, like, for example, they go get a DNA test and they come back and say, see, I didn't have any African heritage. But when you examine it, what you'll find is that they used a Y DNA test that looked at their paternal lineage, and they had YT males who, in essence, bore sons with Black African women, and what you end up with is you have a Black phenotypical person, male, but when you take their DNA, it tests as European. And what happens is if you don't go and take the mtDNA and take the other DNA tests, what happens is your African heritage is hidden. So you have people that are running around claiming they have no African heritage, but they in fact do. They just took the wrong test and they didn't properly investigate it.
Correct.
And so, this is the kind of thing that's going on. And what they do is they take these kinds of pieces of information, exploit it to make you think, well, you're not an African. You have no African heritage.
But why you think about Negro, Negro, all these 14 nicknames, if we were just one nation, like if we were only African, they wouldn't call us Negro, African American, a whole bunch of nicknames. If we were just one nation, they would say we were African, not just a whole bunch of nicknames.
Wait, if we could kind of stay, if we could kind of just stay where, just 1 second, Yakub, if we could kind of just stay where the host was at, like if you could just continue, I just wanted to say that I definitely do agree with what you're saying. Like Marcus Garvey is actually a perfect example of that. While he's phenotypically of African descent, he is autosomally of
answer my question first.
Miss Unthinker.
You just totally ignored everything.
He was going somewhere. If we could just finish where we were at.
I want him to answer my question about the Negro, African American, and a whole bunch of nicknames.
Yeah, she's a disruptor. But
why won't you answer that question,
Ozzie,
pseudo? Why won't you answer that question if you're so smart?
1 second.
If you're so smart, why won't you answer that question?
You probably need some mods, like, or something, because some of these people are not
he
well.
can't because it's bullshit.
Well, some of these people, some of these people are not well. If I could just finish, I was almost done. Just to back up what Dr. Ozie is saying is that definitely Marcus Garvey, who is somebody that you would never assume, he has a European Y chromosome line, and it is through that interaction. 1 in 3 out of all Black men in the New World have a European Y haplogroup, and that is due to the transatlantic slave trade and the interaction with African women producing males.
Correct. And that's correct. And that's the answer the sister was trying to ask the question. I think that answers it. And it's important really to really understand, like, for example, you take the words Negro, Black, African. What we're talking about is words or labels. And what happens is you have different groups that use different words. Like the Spanish will come in and they say Negro. You have, the English come in, they use another word. You have the French come in, use another word. So you have all these different words that are used.
But they didn't call us African, right? They never called us African ever. Just a whole bunch of different
terms. That's not African. If you look up the term, that N word, it directly means black. That directly means African.
That does not mean African. It means black. Yeah. It means us a necromancy. It's necromancy. And first of all, I'm not black. My skin color is way different than my black shirt.
What?
Okay.
Yeah,
magic. We doing magic.
What she's doing is you can tell the sources of information that the sister's getting, right? The bottom line, sister, is that okay. Like for example, if you go back, for example, to the Dred Scott decision, they clearly talk about Africans that were brought from Africa as part of the Dred Scott decision. You can go back earlier than that, and you find numerous public documents and records. Even when I go back and study my own personal genealogy and look at my grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers, I have numerous instances of them identifying themselves as African in public records and documents that they themselves signed. So if you go back and look at the use of the term African, it is something that has been around for quite a while since we've been in this country, right? And so in terms of taking a look at it and making those arguments and saying that the word Negroes is necromancy and all that, those are arguments that are made by someone who really is, I hate to say it, but really stretching it to try to make an argument that has no basis in logic. Because that's not what the word meant. You take a word that has some similarity and it don't mean what you're saying that it means, right? What someone's told you that it means, they use that to make you shun or dislike the word or to try to make their argument to make you believe a certain way when in fact the definition of the word that they use is not true.
And Miss Thinker, if I could, you keep showing the picture of the boat, this Khufu ship that was preserved in Egypt. If you read the webpage that you're on, it tells you that boat was found sealed in a pit. So it was not exposed to the elements. That's why it's been preserved. The slave ships were not preserved like that. They weren't sealed in any type of pits or buried or anything like that. So they were exposed to elements. That's why they're not around anymore.
Right.
But even in the source that you're looking at, it tells you it was found sealed in a pit.
Right.
But let me also say that you guys skip from point A to point B. We're not talking about how the slave ship is sealed, not sealed, or what. We talk about how did millions of people come to America without no food, no water, or no direct planning of anything while they're running away from the state.
Hold on. Let me just ask this question. Let me ask everybody on the panel a question. And is that King Tarzan? Can you mute, please? Or whoever.
That's you, Diz. It's Diz.
Who's that making that sound?
That's Diz. It sounds like he's at a ball game, maybe. Diz, that's you. Is that your TV?
Okay. Let me ask this question. Okay. For everybody on the panel. Okay. Let's go back to what did the sister ask? Can anybody repeat what she asked?
She was asking how did they make it with no food and no water, basically across the transatlantic slave trade. But it's an uninformed question.
How is it an uninformed question?
Wait a minute. No, hold up. Let me ask this. Does anyone on this panel think that question is a logical or reasonable question?
Absolutely not.
No, it's not logical.
No.
Only to the non-thinkers they would say that, because it's impossible to not plan a voyage without the right type of food and planning and water and everything. How is that possible? But then they telling us that they took food from Africa and planted it over to America and then burned the ship.
Mr. Hall,
I got to laugh at that.
Let me ask you this.
Wait, so if they were able, if they were able to take food from Africa, bring it and plant it in America, what makes you think they couldn't bring food on the ship? Have them eat food, eat the bare minimum. Hold up, let me speak. 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 Can I speak? Let me finish.
Not planned or directed.
Can I finish?
It's not for gold, not for slave.
Why did she interrupt? Okay, back to what I was saying. If they brought food from America, if they brought food from Africa to America, why wouldn't they just have extra to feed the people there? If they could bring it from Africa to America, that means they could save and preserve it. Meaning
that doesn't. You're not preserving after 2 to 3 month voyage. What are you talking about? And then you're talking about
the ships,
big ships
like
that has to be built in 5 years post. That doesn't make no sense. Big ships. Are you guys in a fairy tale world or not?
So gentlemen,
300 tons. It wasn't a small ship.
So gentlemen, 1 second. When somebody poses this type of argument, you would have, or enters this type of debate, you would have to assume, at least reasonably, assume that they've done their homework, that they have studied some type of slave vessel to know that there was no food or provisions aboard. So with that said, I would like to ask Ms. Thinker, what vessel did you choose upon your research to find out that there was no food aboard?
I didn't have to search for one vessel. It's common logical sense.
And that's the point, Red. That's the point, Red.
The wars that happen at the same. I'm talking.
You hit it on the nail. You hit it on the nail. That was the answer.
Let her say her piece.
Thank you.
That was the answer. She did it.
Let the sister finish her statement.
That was the answer.
Let her finish.
First, I don't have to study a vessel or anything. It's logical common sense, especially when there was war. The same time the wars of Spanish Inquisition happened at the same time. So how is this possible? They're running for the only thing. Their main goal was gold. Even the Elmina Castle was all about gold, not for slaves. So how is that possible? If you're trading,
let her talk. Let her talk, because she actually, even though it sounds like she's arguing and being negative or contrary, she genuinely believes what she's saying.
Absolutely.
And we have to respect that she genuinely believes it. And in order to help her, we need to let her say, and then we need to be able to reason with her and show her facts and evidence to help her along.
Dr. Ozie, 1 second, child. I do want to say this is her 117th panel being explained some of these exact same things. So hopefully we do get it right this time. I do want to speak after her.
Even if she doesn't get it, somebody listening will.
Absolutely. That's why.
But my question is, if you study it during the time of that period with the Spanish Inquisition, it seems like they just came over there and then turned the Indians, like with the Bible, brought the Bible, convinced everyone to turn Catholic or Christian, which is what we majority are, and then befriend the Indians, and then kill them after.
Analyze.
Yeah, and then kill them after they convince them. That's the only common sense, logical story. The slave ship doesn't make no sense. I'm talking. God damn. But yeah.
On a life, sister. On a life.
Okay.
So, Ms. Baker, what you have to do is take a look at history and see during the time of the African slave trade, what type of ships were different countries like Spain and England using? Because you will get your answer there.
They were using Christianity.
These were not small.
And what I've been trying to say,
Inquisition.
and what I've been trying to say, though, just real quick for context about this conversation, what I've been trying to say, real quick for context, while she's arguing minuscule things like food and rations.
Because it doesn't make no sense.
If I could just say this one thing, Miss Thinker, if I could just say this one. Miss Thinker, if I could just say this one thing.
Slaves, 6 slaves. That's not a slave at that point.
She's dizzy. Again, though, what I'm trying to say is, if y'all don't know that how lucrative the transatlantic slave trade, I mean, the profits are estimated to be over 300%.
Which is the limited capacity.
We're talking about Miss Unthinker. Miss Non-Thinker, Miss No Thoughts, can I please finish my
Mr.
statement?
Fasudo,
and that's why they're asking for the panel to be
Mr. Fasudo,
because she is unhinged.
I'm trying to avoid dropping people.